The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly before Station K927, a bustling hub of interstellar activity where countless species crossed paths. Through one of the observation windows, Dai watched a passenger ship dock smoothly at the station's main port, its sleek hull gleaming under the distant starlight. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, her dark eyes reflecting the twinkling stars beyond. 10 years of working as the station's lead xenobiologist had taught her much about alien behavior, but nothing had prepared her for the puzzling events of the past few months. The first incident occurred during what should have been a routine morning. Da had been reviewing specimen data when the station's AI announced an unauthorized presence near the human quarters. She had rushed to investigate, expecting trouble. Instead, she found a Rathi cub, a creature that looked like a cross between an earth bear and a lion, with iridescent fur that shifted colors in the light. The sight had stopped her in her tracks. Rathi were known throughout the galaxy as one of the most protective species when it came to their young. They would rather die than leave their cubs unattended. Yet there it was, a precious Rathi cub, deliberately left at the human quarters entrance. Before she could alert station security, a shadow had moved in the corridor. A massive adult Rathi, presumably the parent, watched from around the corner. Their eyes met briefly, and to Da's surprise, the adult Rathi had nodded once before disappearing into the station's winding corridors. That was just the beginning. Within days, more Rathi cubs appeared. Then came the Karn cubs, with their wolf-like features and silver-tipped fur. The feline Miri followed, leading their spotted young ones. Even the Tress, reptilian beings who rarely interacted with other species, began bringing their hatchlings. The human quarters soon transformed into an impromptu nursery. Other xenobiologists from different stations called daily, asking if Dai was experiencing the same phenomenon. She was, and on a larger scale than anyone else. Da, Han's voice pulled her from her memories. Her colleague stood at the entrance to the observation deck, his usually neat uniform wrinkled from a long shift. "We've got another one." Following Han through the station's corridors, Dai noticed how the other species watched them pass. There was something new in their gazes, a mix of respect, curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite name. They reached the human quarters to find a small bundle of silver fur curled up near the entrance. A Karn cub, its tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful sleep. Around its neck hung a simple collar with markings that identified its clan. "This makes 17 this week," Day said softly, kneeling beside the cub. Its fur felt impossibly soft as she carefully scooped it up. The cub stirred slightly, snuggling closer to her warmth without waking. "What makes them trust us so much?" Han shook his head, reaching out to stroke the cub's ear. "I've been going through the station's records. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Not here, not anywhere." As if in response to their conversation, a low rumble echoed through the corridor. Both humans turned to see a massive Karn adult, easily twice Day's height, standing at the far end. Its silver fur gleamed under the station's lights, and its intelligent eyes fixed on the cub in Da's arms. Instead of showing aggression, the Karn adult sat on its haunches, tail curled neatly around its feet. It watched as Da carried its cub into the human quarters, making no move to follow or interfere. "Did you see that?" Han whispered once they were inside. "It's like they're choosing us. But why?" Da placed the sleeping cub in one of the specially prepared beds, alongside 3 Miri kittens and a Tress hatchling. The sight of all these different species sleeping peacefully together, under human care, made her throat tight with emotion. "I don't know," she admitted, watching the young ones sleep, "but I intend to find out. Whatever it is about humans that makes them trust us with their most precious ones, there has to be a reason." Outside the window, stars continued their eternal dance across space, while inside Station K927, an extraordinary mystery continued to unfold. Neither Day nor Han could know it then, but they were witnessing the beginning of something that would change human-alien relations forever. The question wasn't just why these predator species trusted humans with their young. The real question was, what had they seen in humanity that humans themselves had yet to discover? Sam's office was a maze of holographic displays, each showing different data streams that painted the air with a soft blue glow. He hadn't left this room for 3 days straight, surviving on station-issued meal packs and synthetic coffee, while he chased down patterns in the numbers that danced before his eyes. The door slid open with a gentle hiss, and Day entered, carrying 2 fresh cups of real coffee. The rich aroma cut through the recycled station air, making Sam's stomach rumble. "You look like you haven't slept," Day said, placing 1 cup next to his workstation. Dark circles under his eyes confirmed her observation. "Sleep can wait," Sam replied, taking a grateful sip. "I found something incredible. Come look at this." His fingers moved through the air like a conductor leading an invisible orchestra, manipulating the holographic displays. Data points crystallized into clear patterns, forming graphs and charts that filled the room. "Look at these numbers." He pointed to a steadily rising line. Every predator species that has spent more than 3 months around humans has started exhibiting the same behavior. They're not just leaving their cubs with us. They're specifically seeking us out as caretakers. Day stepped closer, her eyes scanning the data. "Show me the details." Sam pulled up the security footage. The first video showed a Rothi parent lurking in the shadows of Corridor B, watching a group of humans playing with children from various species. The massive creature's eyes tracked every movement, every interaction. "This Rothi spent 2 weeks observing before leaving their cub," Sam explained, fast-forwarding through days of footage. "But look at this one." He pulled up another feed, showing a different Rothi. This one only watched for 3 days before making the decision. More footage appeared, a Miri scout carefully following human maintenance workers, a Tress observer stationed in the ventilation systems above the human quarters, a pack of Karn taking turns monitoring human behavior patterns. "They're studying us," Dai breathed, watching the footage with growing amazement. "Like we're the subjects of some grand experiment." Sam nodded eagerly. "Exactly. And look at this." He pulled up a new chart. "The time they spend observing before trusting us with their young is decreasing. The first ones watched for weeks. Now some are making the decision within days. They're sharing information," Day realized. "The species are communicating with each other about us." "Not just communicating," Sam corrected, pulling up another dataset. "They're coordinating. Look at the nursery occupation patterns." The display showed a complex schedule of when different species left their young. There was no overlap in peak times, no overcrowding. Somehow, the predator species had organized themselves into shifts. "But why us?" Dai wondered aloud, watching a time-lapse of cubs being dropped off and picked up with clockwork precision. Of all species in the galaxy, why trust humans? Sam pulled up one final piece of footage. It showed a human maintenance worker, Lee, finding an injured Miri cub in a service tunnel. Without hesitation, Lee had scooped up the cub, used his own water ration to clean its wounds, and torn his uniform to make bandages. The footage showed him working for hours, speaking softly to the frightened creature until help arrived. "I found hundreds of incidents like this," Sam said quietly. "Humans dropping everything to help young ones in distress, regardless of species. No hesitation, no calculation of benefit. Just help." Day watched the footage loop again, seeing the gentle care in Lee's movements. "Have you compared this behavior to other species?" Sam nodded, pulling up a new dataset. "Most species show strong protective instincts toward their own young, but that instinct rarely extends to other species. Humans are different. The data shows we treat all young ones as if they were our own." A soft chirping sound interrupted them. A small Tress hatchling had wandered into the office, probably escaped from the nursery. Without thinking, both Sam and Da moved to protect it from the sharp edges of the desk and the tangles of power cables. Sam smiled as Dag gently scooped up the hatchling. See, we just proved my point. It's instinctive for us. We don't even think about it. The hatchling chirped happily in Dag's arms, its scales changing color to match her uniform. Through the office window, they could see a Tress adult watching from the corridor, making no move to intervene. Keep tracking the patterns, Dag said, settling the hatchling more comfortably in her arms. I have a feeling we're just beginning to understand what's really happening here. Sam turned back to his displays, fingers already dancing through new data streams. The mystery was deepening, but with each passing day, they were getting closer to understanding why humanity had been chosen for this extraordinary role in the galaxy's future. The ancient library section of Station K927 was rarely visited. Most crew members preferred the digital archives, but Jin liked the feel of real paper under his fingers. He sat surrounded by old Earth books, their pages yellow with age, their spines cracked and worn. The soft hum of the station's life support system was his only company as he searched through humanity's past for answers. The message that brought him here had been urgent. After days of studying the predator species' behavior, Dai had asked him to look into human history for any similar patterns. At first, he thought it was a waste of time. But then he found it. A book about ancient human civilizations and their relationship with Earth's predators. His fingers trembled as he read about the first wolves that approached human campfires, about big cats that chose to live alongside humans, about bears that shared their hunting grounds with human tribes. Page after page revealed a pattern that stretched back to the very beginning of human civilization. Dai, he called over the station's comm system. You need to see this. Now. She arrived 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath, with some trailing behind her. Jin barely noticed them enter, his eyes still fixed on the books spread before him. Look at this, he said, pushing an open book toward them. The page showed cave paintings of humans hunting alongside wolves. And this. Another book, this one showing ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs of humans caring for lion cubs. And this. A third book filled with stories of human tribes raising orphaned predator young. I don't understand, Sam said, peering at the ancient images. What are we looking at? We're looking at the answer, Jin replied, his voice filled with excitement. Our ancestors were different from every other species we've met in space. They didn't just hunt predators or run from them. They formed relationships with them. They took wolves and turned them into dogs. They took wild cats and made them into companions. Day picked up one of the books, her eyes widening as she read. Are you saying this behavior we're seeing now? Predator species trusting us with their young. It's connected to our past. Jin nodded eagerly. I had the medical team run some tests. Humans produce unique pheromones that have a calming effect on predator young. It's not just psychological, it's biological. Our bodies evolved to be trusted by predators. He pulled up a holographic display showing molecular structures. See these compounds? They're present in human sweat, breath, even our skin cells. They're similar to the calming pheromones predator mothers produce for their young. That's why they trust us, Sam whispered, understanding dawning on his face. We literally smell safe to them. A soft growl from the doorway made them all turn. A Rathi stood there, its massive form barely fitting through the library entrance. In its arms, it held a sleeping cub. Without hesitation, it approached Da and gently placed the cub in her arms. The humans watched in amazement as the Rathi then settled onto the floor, picked up one of the books with surprisingly delicate claws, and began examining the pictures of ancient humans with their animal companions. They're aware of it too, Jin said softly, watching the Rathi study the images. They can sense what we are, what we've always been. The Rathi looked up from the book and made a series of complex gestures. The station's translation system interpreted. Your kind has always been the nurturers. We see in you what your ancestors were. You are trusted because you have earned trust since before the stars were reached. Day sat down next to the Rathi, the sleeping cub still in her arms. "Can you tell us more about how your species knows this?" The Rathi's fur shifted colors as it considered the question. "We have stories." The translation came. Ancient stories of a species that would one day come from the stars, carrying the gift of trust. A species that could touch the hearts of predators and be trusted with their young. "When we met humans, we recognized the stories had been about you." Jin hurriedly grabbed a data pad, recording every word. This was more than just history. This was the key to understanding humanity's unique role in the galaxy. As he watched Da with the Rathi cub, another thought struck him. "We're not just caretakers," he said. "We're bridge builders. Our ancestors didn't just tame predators. They formed partnerships with them. They created bonds that transformed both species." The Rathi made a sound that the translator interpreted as agreement. "That is why we trust you with our young. You do not seek to change them. You seek to understand them, to help them grow, to form bonds that make both stronger." The station's night cycle was always quieter, with only the essential crew moving through its dimly lit corridors. Dad was making her final rounds in the nursery, checking on the sleeping cubs. The soft breathing of dozens of young ones filled the air, a peaceful symphony of different species resting under human protection. The first sign that something was wrong was a flicker in the lighting system. Dad looked up from adjusting a Karn cub's blanket, frowning at the shadows that seemed to move against the walls. The station's temperature dropped suddenly, making her shiver. A quiet scraping sound came from the ventilation system above. She reached for her communicator, but before she could call security, she heard it. A soft, wet thud from the far corner of the nursery where the Miri cubs slept. Moving quickly but quietly between the sleeping forms, Dai made her way to the sound source. The shadows seemed to retreat as she approached, sliding away like oil on water. When she reached the Miri cub's sleeping area, her blood ran cold. One of the cubs lay motionless, its usually vibrant fur now dull and lifeless. The small body was completely drained, like a dried husk. Day's medical scanner showed no life signs, no energy readings, nothing. It was as if something had sucked the very essence from the young one. The station's alarm began to wail, its red emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Through the nursery windows, Dai saw more of the strange, sliding shadows moving through the corridors. They seemed to flow like liquid darkness, avoiding the light. "Security breach in Section 7, the station's AI announced. "Unknown biological entities detected. All personnel, implement quarantine protocols." The nursery door burst open as Han rushed in, his uniform disheveled. "Dai, we got reports of shadow creatures all over the station." There, he stopped short, seeing the lifeless Miri cub. A piercing roar shook the station's walls. The Miri parent had discovered their loss. The sound of grief and rage echoed through every corridor, every chamber, waking cubs and sending station crews scrambling for cover. "Nax," a gravelly voice said from the doorway. A Tress elder stood there, its scales dark with fear. "They are the Nax, ancient hunters that feed on the life force of the young. They follow their prey across the stars, striking from the shadows." More roars joined the first as other predator parents realized the danger. The station became a chorus of protective fury, but the shadows continued to slide through the walls, getting closer to the nursery. "We need to protect them," Dai declared, her voice firm with resolve. "All of them." She turned to Han. "Get me station control. We need to reroute power to increase lighting in all corridors. These things hate light. Let's use that." As Han rushed to the communications panel, Dai began organizing the awakened cubs. The young ones sensed the danger, huddling close to her and the other human caretakers who had arrived to help. "Form a circle," she ordered the humans. "Cubs in the center. Use your body heat and pheromones. Keep them calm." She remembered Jin's discovery about human biological traits. If their pheromones could calm the cubs, maybe they could use that advantage. The shadows pressed against the nursery windows, searching for a way in. In the corridors beyond, station security teams were setting up light barriers, but the Nax seemed to find ways through the smallest gaps of darkness. "Da," Sum's voice came through her communicator. "I'm seeing something strange in the bio-readings. The Nax, they're not just avoiding our lights. They're reacting to human presence. Our pheromones seem to interfere with their hunting patterns." A plan began to form in Da's mind. "Sam, can you analyze the composition of our calming pheromones? If we could synthesize them, amplify them." "Already on it," he replied. "But it'll take time. You need to keep those cubs safe until we can develop a defense." Another shadow slipped through a crack in the ventilation system, reaching for a Karn cub. Without thinking, Dai threw herself between the creature and its intended prey. The shadow touched her skin, and she felt an icy coldness try to pull at her life force. But something was different. The shadow recoiled, as if her very presence was painful to it. The other humans noticed too, positioning themselves as living shields around the cubs. "We are the nurturers," Dai said, remembering the Rathi's words. "And we will not let you harm them." The battle for Station K927 had begun, and humanity was about to show the galaxy another side of their protective nature, one that even the shadows would learn to fear. The security office had been transformed into a command center, with holographic displays showing every corner of Station K927. Young stood at the central console, his usually pristine uniform now wrinkled from hours of constant work. Dark circles under his eyes showed his exhaustion, but his voice remained strong as he addressed the gathered humans. "We know they'll come again," he said, pointing to the shadow movements tracked across multiple displays. "The Nax are drawn to the cubs like moths to flame. We need to be ready." The room was packed with station personnel: engineers, medical staff, maintenance workers, scientists. None of them were soldiers, but every face showed the same determined expression. Yum had never seen such unity among the crew. "I've divided the station into protection zones," he continued, bringing up a 3D map. "Each team will cover specific areas. Remember, the Nax can't stand our presence, but they'll try to find gaps in our defense. Stay alert, stay together." Rim, a botanist who normally spent her days tending the station's hydroponic gardens, raised her hand. "What about the nursery? It's their primary target." "That's where we'll have our strongest presence," Yum replied. 4 humans per shift, working in pairs. The predator parents will guard the outer perimeter while we protect the cubs directly. As if summoned by his words, a massive Karn elder entered the room. Its silver fur was streaked with battle scars, and its eyes held ancient wisdom. The humans made way respectfully as it approached Young. "My pack has news," the Karn announced, its words translated by the station's eye. "More Nax ships have been detected approaching the station. They hunt in waves, each larger than the last." Young nodded grimly. "How long do we have?" "Hours, perhaps less." The room erupted in activity as humans rushed to their assigned positions. Young watched them go, noting how they moved with purpose, without panic. These weren't trained warriors, but something more primal had awakened in them, an ancient protective instinct that ran deeper than fear. In the nursery, Rim helped organize the sleeping areas, making sure each cub was within easy reach of a human protector. She had volunteered for the most dangerous shift, the station's night cycle when the Nax were strongest. "You should rest," Dai told her, seeing how tired she looked. Rim shook her head. "I'll rest when they're safe." The attack came just as the night cycle began. Shadows poured through the station's seams like liquid darkness, seeking the young ones. But this time, they found humans ready and waiting. When a Nax tried to breach the nursery's ventilation system, Rim spotted it first. Without hesitation, she threw herself at the shadow creature, her bare hands passing through its cold substance. The touch burned like frost, but she held on, giving others time to activate the emergency lights. The Nax writhed in her grip, trying to drain her life force, but human biology rejected its feeding attempt. Rim's skin blistered with cold burns, yet she didn't let go until the creature dissipated in the sudden brightness. Rim. Day rushed to help her injured colleague. "You need medical attention." "The cubs," Rim gasped. "Are they safe?" The Karn elder, who had witnessed the entire scene, approached slowly. Its massive form towered over the humans, but its posture showed deep respect. "Your species," the Karn observed, "fights like a mother protecting her young. We have seen many brave warriors, but never have we witnessed such devotion from those not of our own blood." Young arrived with a medical team, but Rim refused to leave her post until her replacement arrived. Other humans throughout the station showed similar dedication, standing guard despite exhaustion, fighting shadows with whatever tools they had. The predator species watched in amazement as humans displayed unprecedented protective behaviors. Engineers worked tirelessly to maintain the light barriers. Medical staff treated injuries without rest. Even the kitchen crew organized to ensure every protector was fed and hydrated. "We're holding them back," Young reported during a brief meeting. "But we need a more permanent solution. We can't maintain this level of defense indefinitely." Sum's voice came over the comm system. "I think we found something. The human pheromones. We've managed to synthesize them. If we can modify the station's air filtration system." "Do it," Yum ordered. "Whatever resources you need, take them." As the station's crew rallied for another night of battle, the Karn elder watched the humans at work. It saw how they moved in perfect coordination despite never training together, how they anticipated each other's needs without words, how they put themselves between danger and the cubs without hesitation. Perhaps, it said to no one in particular, this is why the ancient stories spoke of humans, not just as nurturers, but as warriors who fight with love instead of hate. Around the station, humans continued their vigilant guard, their determination growing stronger with each attack repelled. They were no longer just caretakers, they had become protectors, defenders, a pack united in purpose. And the Nax were about to learn why every predator species in the galaxy had chosen to trust humans with their most precious treasures. The station's night cycle started with an eerie silence. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow through the corridors, and the usual hum of machinery seemed muffled, as if the station itself was holding its breath. In the nursery, Dai watched the cubs sleep while Young checked the security feeds one last time. "Something's different," Young muttered, his eyes scanning the monitors. "The shadow movements, they're too organized." Sum's voice crackled over the comm system, urgent and breathless. "Multiple breaches detected. They're coming in through every maintenance shaft, every cooling vent. Hundreds of them." The shadows came all at once, pouring through the walls like black water. The temperature plummeted as the Nax swarmed toward the nursery, their dark forms merging and separating like a living tide of darkness. "Everyone in position," Yum shouted, activating the emergency protocols. The humans had trained for this, had prepared for the worst. Now they would see if it was enough. Day moved quickly among the sleeping cubs, waking them gently but urgently. "Form the circle," she ordered the human defenders. "Remember your training. Don't let them find any gaps." The humans linked arms, creating a living barrier around the cubs. Engineers, scientists, maintenance workers, every human on the station had a place in the defense. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their bodies radiating the protective pheromones that the Nax couldn't stand. The first wave hit like a frozen blast. Shadows slammed against the human barrier, seeking any weakness. Where they touched human skin, frost formed instantly. Pain showed on many faces, but no one moved from their position. "Hold the line," Young commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Don't let them through." Rim, her hands still bandaged from her previous encounter, stood firm as a shadow tried to slip between her and another defender. "Not today," she growled, pressing closer to seal the gap. "Not ever." The cubs huddled in the center, surprisingly calm despite the battle raging around them. The human pheromones kept them peaceful, while their instincts told them they were in the safest place possible, surrounded by human protectors. A massive crash echoed through the station as the predator parents arrived. Rathi, Karn, Miri, and Tress, all of them fighting side by side, tearing through the shadows with claws and fangs. They formed an outer ring of defense, pushing back against the endless tide of Nax. "Sam," Da called over the comm. "We need that pheromone release now." "Systems ready," Sam replied. "But if we do this, we'll be pumping it through every air vent in the station." "The concentration." "Do it," Yum ordered. "Maximum output." The station's ventilation system hummed to life. Within seconds, the air became thick with synthesized human pheromones. The effect on the Nax was immediate and devastating. The shadow creatures began to fragment, their dark forms breaking apart like smoke in a strong wind. But they weren't retreating. The Nax, driven by ancient hunger, pressed their attack with desperate fury. Where one shadow fell, two more took its place, pushing against the human barrier with increasing force. "We can't hold them much longer," someone shouted as more defenders suffered frost burns from the constant contact. That's when Dad noticed something extraordinary. The cubs, previously quiet, had begun to emit their own unique sounds. Each species added its voice to a growing chorus. Rathi growls, Karn howls, Miri purrs, and Tress hisses, all blending together. The sound grew stronger, and with it came a strange light. Each cub began to glow with a soft bioluminescence, a natural defense mechanism triggered by their combined voices. The light spread outward, passing harmlessly through the human defenders to strike the Nax like physical blows. "Keep going." Da encouraged the cubs, understanding what was happening. "You're helping us fight." The combined effect of human pheromones, predator strength, and the cubs' natural light proved too much for the Nax. Their shadowy forms began to dissolve, not just breaking apart, but completely disintegrating. The last of the shadow creatures vanished with a sound like a dying wind, leaving behind only frost patterns on the station walls and the lingering glow of the cubs' light. As the emergency lights flickered back to full power, humans and predators looked at each other with new understanding. They had fought together, defended together, and won together. A Rathi cub broke from the group to nuzzle against Da's frost-burned hands, its soft fur soothing the pain. One by one, other cubs did the same for their human protectors, their natural healing abilities helping to mend the injuries their defenders had suffered on their behalf. "Your kind," the Karn elder said, approaching Young and Dai, "has proven worthy of our trust 1,000 times over this day." The station slowly returned to normal operations, but something fundamental had changed. The bond between humans and predator species had been forged in battle, tempered by sacrifice, and strengthened by victory. The Nax would never again threaten the cubs under human protection. The price had proven too high. The station's repair crews worked tirelessly to remove the last traces of frost damage from the walls. 2 weeks had passed since the battle with the Nax, but the memory remained fresh in everyone's minds. The nursery had been moved to a larger section of the station, and everywhere Dad looked, she saw signs of the new reality they now lived in. Humans and predator species worked side by side, rebuilding and strengthening the station's defenses. The separation that had once existed between species had melted away, replaced by a deep understanding born of shared battle and sacrifice. In the new nursery, Rim sat cross-legged on the floor, her healing hands gently stroking a Miri cub while a Rathi youngster napped with its head in her lap. The sight of her calming presence with the cubs made Dai smile. The quiet botanist had become one of the most requested caretakers among the predator parents. "The council is ready," Young announced, appearing at Da's side. His uniform was crisp and formal, the only hint of the battle being a small scar above his eye where a Nax had struck him. The station's main gathering hall had been transformed for the ceremony. Representatives from every predator species stood in a circle, their cubs playing freely in the center under human watch. The sight would have been unthinkable just months ago. The wrathy ambassador stepped forward, its iridescent fur shimmering under the station lights. "We gather today to acknowledge what we have learned about our human allies," its voice carried through the hall. "Our instincts led us to trust them with our young, but we did not fully understand why until now." Sam, standing near Day, pulled up a holographic display showing the molecular structure of human pheromones. "We've identified 27 unique compounds that make humans natural caretakers," he explained to the assembly. "But the chemistry is only part of the story." Jin stepped forward next, holding one of his ancient books. "Our history shows this pattern throughout human development. We evolved not just to survive, but to nurture. Not just to fight, but to protect. The battle against the Nax proved that these traits are still central to who we are." The Karn Elder moved to the center of the circle, its battle-scarred form commanding instant respect. "In the darkest moment, when shadows threatened our young, humans stood as a living shield. They fought not with weapons, but with the strength of their hearts. They suffered pain without yielding, faced death without fleeing." A Miri queen, her spotted fur gleaming, added her voice. "They did this not for reward or honor, but because it is their nature. Just as we hunt, just as we roar, humans protect. It is what they are." "You are guardians," the wrathy ambassador declared, turning to face the assembled humans. "Your species carries the instinct to protect, not just your own, but all young who need care. This is a gift we did not know existed in the galaxy." As if to emphasize the point, a young Tress hatchling broke free from the playgroup and scampered straight to Da. Without thinking, she scooped it up, cradling it naturally as its scales changed color to match her uniform. The assembled predators watched this simple interaction with knowing eyes. This was what had drawn them to trust humans, not just their pheromones or their strength, but these small, instinctive moments of care. From this day forward, the wrathy ambassador continued, "Humans will be known throughout the galaxy as the nurturers. All species will know that their young are safe in human care, that human protection means sanctuary, that human love extends beyond the boundaries of form or origin." Day carried the Tress hatchling to her familiar spot on the observation deck after the ceremony. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if they too were celebrating this new understanding. Below her, in the station's recreation area, human and predator children played together without fear or hesitation. She understood now. Humans weren't just another species in the galaxy. They were the caretakers, the protectors, the ones who would fight to defend any child, regardless of species. Their role wasn't given to them by chance or circumstance, but was written in their very DNA, carved into their hearts by millions of years of evolution. The Tress hatchling chirped softly in her arms, and Da smiled. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not their technology or their strength, but their endless capacity to care, to protect, to love beyond boundaries. And that, more than anything else, made all the difference. A new chapter had begun, not just for Station K927, but for all of humanity. They had found their place among the stars, not as conquerors or traitors, but as guardians of the galaxy's future, protectors of its most precious treasures. The stars twinkled in response, as if acknowledging this universal truth. In a galaxy full of hunters and prey, humans had become something unique. They had become the ones that every species could trust with their hearts, their hopes, and most importantly, their children.